All right, hello everyone. This is the first of many videos to come that will hopefully give you a good idea and a good understanding of the Proclaim software. This is just going to be an introductory video. We're going to walk through just some of the basics, some of what you're going to see on your screen here, and just kind of give you an overall understanding of like I said, just the basic layout of everything. In the videos to come, we'll go into more detail, but this is just to kind of help this seem a little less overwhelming. Proclaim is similar to PowerPoint, but there are some functions of it that are different, so just keep that in mind. Your natural tendency might want to do something that you can do in PowerPoint, and it's possible that Proclaim does it. You might just have to go about it a little differently. One thing to keep in mind is that Proclaim is made specifically for worship presentations, which is actually what makes it a little superior to PowerPoint. There are some things that it does that simplify things a lot, make things easier, make things faster. But because of that, the functions are just a little different than PowerPoint. So just keep that in mind as you're going through different things. Okay. So when you open Proclaim, which I did just by clicking on the icon over here, this is basically what you're going to see. So over here you have your screen that you've selected, and in the middle here you have the section where you can edit your text. We'll get more into that later. I just kind of want to show you where all that is. And then on the left here, this is where you're going to see all of your slides, okay? We'll get more into that later. Also on the left at the top, this is where your title is going to be. Now the title is important. You can see that I'm actually editing an old service. The title is important because this is how you're going to find your presentation. Sometimes, and I've done this a lot, I'll duplicate an old presentation and then I won't change the title, and then I won't be able to find it because I'll be looking for the title I thought that I gave it, and it won't be there because I didn't actually change the title. So it's important to change the title. So like right now, because I'm editing an old service, the title is still the same. It's still March 1st, which was a Sunday, and we had our contemporary worship service that day. If you'll see down below, you'll see a date function. Now this is important too because this is when you actually set the service to begin. So Proclaim has a cool feature where if you set the service date and you set the time, the service will start automatically. Now for that to happen, you need to set the correct date. Now, just for our purposes, I just chose tomorrow as our service day. I know that's not what would usually happen. So let's say you were creating a service today, you would want to select the 26th. And say you would change it to Sunday, the 26th. But just for our purposes, I'm going to set our service day as tomorrow. So title function. Okay, so if I was doing this, and let's say our service was tomorrow, I would put April 23rd. And just for the heck of it, I'll put Thursday because tomorrow's Thursday. Okay, so that's the easiest way to find things. Just set things to the date that they're happening. So there you see our date of the title of our presentation is April 23rd, Thursday, and I just went ahead and set the date to that also. So those two things are really important. Title, so you can find your presentation, and just set the day that the service is going to be. If it's a Wednesday night service, then obviously you would send it to a Wednesday date. Okay? All right, so once you figure those things out, you'll keep going down the left side here, and you'll see a bunch of different slides, but you'll also notice that there are categories here. So the first category is a pre-service loop, okay? And you have a warm-up loop. We're not going to really use that much, at least I don't use that, but that is a function that's there. And then you have your service, which is obviously your core grouping of slides for the service, and then you have your post-service loop. The pre-service loop and the post-service loop are basically just announcement slides. So These are where your announcements are going to go. Your welcome slides. That's where the trivia is. This is just where all of our announcements go. Okay, and you'll see as I'm selecting slides, they're popping up here on the right where you can look at them. So those are announcements. The warm-up we're not going to use so much, so don't worry about that right now. But you go down and here are all your service slides. Okay. And again, don't be too overwhelmed by this. We'll go into things in detail later on. But one thing I do want to draw your attention to is the service time. So because it's a contemporary service, I set the service time to start at 10:45, but you can set that to start whenever you want. Now, the reason why that's important is because when you tell the presentation to go what they call on air, it will automatically begin with your announcement slides. So when I click on air, it's going to automatically start with our announcement slides, and it'll loop through all of these automatically until the time that I told it the service starts. So again, that's why it's important to have the correct date and the correct time, because technically, so let's say that I just put this on air right now, it would loop through all these announcement slides until tomorrow, Thursday, April 23rd at 10:45 a.m. At that time, it would automatically advance to the service slides, okay? Which is pretty cool. I mean, that gives you the ability to set the announcement slides on loop and then not worrying about clicking through it yourself or having to start the presentation again when you get to your service. It'll cycle through the announcements, and then automatically at the time that you've set here, the service will begin. It'll go to this first service slide. Okay, so those seem like minor things, but they're really important. The date of the service that you've set and the time that you set the service to start. Now, as you go through the service, you'll get to the end of the service, and once you get into your post-service loop, obviously those will loop through until you end the presentation. Okay, so again, we'll get more into how to edit some of these things and some of the ins and outs of each of the categories. But I just want to kind of give you guys an overview of what that looks like. So just to kind of review, giving your presentation a title is an important thing to do right off the bat. Also, setting the date is an important thing to do right off the bat, and then making sure you have the correct service time. Now, I've run into this issue in the past where maybe I've had to change the service time and I forget to, and then when I put on my pre-service loop, the service doesn't start automatically whenever I want it to. So making sure that is correct is also very important. Okay, I think I've overstated my welcome on that, but that's the gist of this whole bar over here. At the top, you're going to see probably some pretty familiar tabs that you can use. Your File tab is where you're going to either start a new presentation. You can open an old presentation, so you open here and you can find, they'll put recent ones up here, or you can find a new one. Sorry, you can search to find an old one. They also have an open recent option, so you'll see some of the things that we've been working on. So this is actually this Sunday's presentation, April 26th. That's where you can open recent. You can also duplicate slides or presentations. This is not to get into this too much, but this is a function that you will use pretty much all the time. And the reason for that is that it's much easier to duplicate a presentation and edit it than it is to just start a new presentation completely from scratch. So for this test run that we're doing right now, I duplicated a presentation from March 1st and it just dumped it all in here. And all I had to do was change the date up here, or I had to change the title, sorry, and I had to make sure the date was set correctly. And then I could just edit it from there. So the duplicate feature is something that you will definitely want to use just to save yourself time, to make things easier. If you want to duplicate something, you go here. It would probably be easier to search something you want to duplicate. Let's say I want to duplicate a contemporary service. I can spell. Okay, so I could either search the date or just search contemporary. You'll see a bunch of contemporary services pop up here. Again, that's going to be the easiest way to start a new presentation because you don't have to start from scratch. You can just edit something that already exists. Because contemporary services are kind of on an every other week rotation in terms of communion and non-communion, you're going to want to make sure that you're duplicating presentations that are appropriate for the upcoming weekend. So if this weekend was a communion service, I would want to be sure to duplicate the presentations from 2 weekends ago, right? Because if this weekend was a communion service, last week would have been non-communion, the week before would have been communion. So when you're duplicating, just make sure you duplicate the presentation that is appropriate for the upcoming service. And again, that is just whenever you're creating a presentation for an upcoming Sunday and you don't want to start from scratch, you just go back and you duplicate something that you've already made. If that seems complicated, we'll go through that again. Don't worry about that too much. We'll go over that again in the future, but I just want to kind of to give you an idea of what those features are. Your Add Item tab is also pretty straightforward. If you want to add a song, we'll get into that later. You can add a Bible passage. For the most part, as long as you're duplicating slides, you won't have to use much of these adding features because your template is already going to be here. So if you go down here, you know, we already have our songs in place. You know, that song's already in place. We already have a lot of our core pieces in place, like the invocation and the scripture readings, and even those scripture readings are in here. So you won't have to add a whole lot. Hopefully, it's just a matter of editing something that you've already made. But if you do, this is where you would do that. We'll get into some of those features later as more details. The media tab, it's also something that we're going to get into later. The backgrounds that you see here and the presentation, the announcement slides that you see here, those are all what they consider to be media. Okay, so if you want to browse the media that they have, you open that up and here it is. I mean, they got tons of stuff. We won't get into it right now. We'll get into it later, but just as an introductory thing. They have all types of themes and presentation media that you can use. So I just wanted to show you where that is right now. Again, we'll get into how to make some of that work later. But they got tons of media to choose from. Obviously, you can search different themes. So you can search Easter, and it will pop up with a bunch of Easter-themed media. You can search Lent. They do have some seasonal themes. They're not going to have all the Lutheran seasonal themes, but they do have some. Palm Sunday, different things like that. So that's a really cool resource. That's a really nice perk of Proclaim. Just having all of those backgrounds and media options preloaded. But that's what media is. You can also import your own media. We'll get into that later. But then you have your settings, and hopefully you won't have to deal with settings too much. So those are your tabs. Again, some of those more details we'll get into later. One more thing it's really important to do whenever you're done editing a presentation. Up here, you'll see this little green check mark. And if you hover over it, you'll see something that says all items are up to date. That's what you want. You want all your items to be up to date. And the main reason for that is that Proclaim is a cloud-based software, which is another perk. You can work on it from anywhere. I can work on it here on my computer, and it will automatically update on the computers at church. Whenever you are editing a presentation, or you're opening a presentation and you're ready to present it, just always click up here. Just always make sure that it's synced. Even if there's a green arrow, just click on it again just to double check. What might happen, just to kind of give you an idea, let's say I edit this. Okay, see how it's little blue dots? That means it's not quite synchronized. You'll see synchronization pending. Okay, so what you'll want to do is you'll want to type in make your edits. And then if you're about to close out the presentation, make sure these blue dots aren't there anymore. So click on it. When you click on it, and then it'll show up with synchronization complete. That's what you want. Every time you close out, every time you open up, make sure that synchronization is complete. I say that, and I emphasize that because we've had issues where if that doesn't happen, your saves won't be uploaded, which means they won't show up on other computers at church. Doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's pretty frustrating. So just make sure anytime you're closing out a presentation or opening a presentation, you just give that a click just to make sure. If you are, for whatever reason, not getting internet access, let's say you're just off the internet for some reason, so I'm just gonna click off this for some reason. That will come up as a synchronization error has occurred. That most likely means that you are disconnected from the internet for some reason. But once you reconnect, click on it again, and it'll be good to go. So that's important too. Just a couple other minor things. When you are ready to present your presentation, you click on air. Okay, and there we go. You'll see it. It'll pop up full screen. If you are connected, so for like the computer at church, because it's connected to a projector, this computer wouldn't go full screen if it was connected to a projector. It would send the projection image to the projector. So, but that's how you would put it on air. And again, when it's on air, it automatically goes to your pre-service loop. So to give you a better idea what that looks like, you can preview your service also before it starts. Like I said, it's going through those slides. And obviously, and this is similar to PowerPoint, you can come down here and click on anything, and that's where it will go to. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. All right, I think that just about does it for our introductory video. I apologize if that was too long or too confusing. If you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to contact myself or contact Pastor Chris, and he'll be happy to walk you through any of that stuff. Again, this was just introductory, so it's just a huge, broad brush kind of overview of everything. We will get into more detail in future videos. But this was just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with here. So if anything seems confusing, it's very possible that it'll be addressed in a different video. So please keep an eye out for those. But for right now, that is the introductory video to using the Proclaim software. Thank you for joining us.